morning. Good morning. If you need to shift around a little bit to be comfortable or to be able to see, please feel free to do so. And could we turn the lights up just a little bit? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm a little bit blind, so. And try to find a place where you're going to be able to sit still so that we can kind of hold this space for each other. We tend to get a little bit sloppy on form in the summer, and especially when Hojo-san's not here. So let's try to hold that for each other. And thank you, everybody, for turning out on a beautiful holiday weekend. It occurred to me while we were sitting this morning that we make announcements every week about Dana and how this temple is supported by generosity, and it can be easy to think of that in terms of money or even volunteer energy, but also just being here to practice together is Dana, is generosity. I guarantee that somebody in your community really needed this temple to be here today, and it's only here because we show up to practice. So thank you for being here. I noticed as I was preparing this talk that I am really, for some reason on this topic, I keep wandering off on tangents, so I'm going to try really hard to stick to what I prepared to say. So I titled this talk, "Everything is Not Going to Be Okay. Hallelujah," which now that I'm saying it out loud feels a little bit silly and pretentious, but I'm going to stick with it. But what I'm talking about is that as humans, we tend to be always waiting for circumstances to line up to suit us. We're trying to manipulate circumstances to give us a certain outcome where we feel like in some way things are going to be okay. And we all do that a little bit differently. It plays out in an infinite variety of ways. And it might look like I will be happy when I have a partner, when I'm not alone, when I have the career that I have planned for myself. I will be lovable or acceptable or worthy when I lose 20 pounds or make less mistakes or stop indulging in the bad habit that is driving me crazy. Or I can relax. I will have more time when I don't have to work so much, when my kids are grown up, when I finish school, when I have enough money to pay my bills. Right? There's always something in our life. And all of the different ways that we can do this include some version of things will be better when, or I can start living my life in a way that feels like what it's supposed to be or what I want it to be when these circumstances align. And we do it in big ways, but we also do it in really little ways, constantly. You know, if I can just get through this meeting, I will have a break and I will feel better. If the bell would just ring, my knee will stop hurting. If I could just stop feeling nervous about this talk, then I will have a relaxing Sunday afternoon. If the school year will just end, it will be summer, the kids will be on vacation. If summer will just end and the kids go back to school, right? It's always moving. But the first fundamental truth of Buddhism is suffering, right? Is dukkha. This life is marked by suffering or unsatisfactoriness. It doesn't mean that life is suffering, but life is marked by suffering. And another core truth is impermanence. Right? Things do not ever stay the same. So these come together to mean there will never be a time in any sphere of our life when circumstances are going to line up and be optimal and stay that way. It doesn't mean that things will never work out for us, that things will always be bad. And I could have just as easily titled this talk, "Everything is already okay, so stop worrying about it." So if you're kind of pessimistic, that might be a better title for you. Okay? Things will work out for us, but then they will keep changing. Right? And even when we get everything we want, it doesn't stay satisfying. And we all know this, it's not news, right? We all know, especially by the time we're adults, that, when we fall in love, that new magic doesn't stay magic. We start to notice that the people we love are people. And when we get the perfect job, we find out all the things that's wrong with it, right? There's always a new circumstance. But knowing that doesn't stop us from doing it, right? It is deeply seductive. And I know for myself, the more I pay attention to it, the more I find that I am constantly doing it. And what are the implications of that for my life? The most obvious one to me is that when I am focused on wanting circumstances to change, I'm missing my life. Right? I'm missing my actual life as it is. And when I think back to when I first came to Zen, if somebody asked me, what is it that I want out of practice? That was the biggest thing for me. I don't want to miss my life. Right? I don't want to wake up someday and wonder, what the hell happened? How did I get here? We have blinders on when we are focused on a future outcome, so that we can't see the spaciousness that is right here in this moment. And the picture that always comes into my mind is like from Tron, and there's a little beam of light going from here to there, and you're in the little Tron car. And we think of that's how time unfolds, especially when we are really focused on a particular outcome in the future. Okay? Whether that's getting through some difficulty or looking for the Goldilocks circumstances where it's going to be not too warm and not too cold and everything's going to be perfect. But that's not actually how we live our life, right? We live our life in the present moment, which doesn't ever really turn into that future moment. Or maybe another way of saying it is that if I am missing this moment, I will also be missing that moment when I get there. If I can't find the spaciousness and freedom that I am looking for in this exact moment of my life, I won't be able to find it in any moment of my life. And another implication, or the implication that that leads into for me, is that we are separating ourselves from liberation. Our tradition says that nirvana is not separate from samsara, that the world of bliss is not separate from the world of suffering. They are exactly the same. That freedom and liberation is not separate from our life as it is. But when I am focused on how I need circumstances to line up so that things can be okay, what I'm saying is circumstances as they are now can't be freedom. That I need something to change in order for it to feel like liberation. And that's putting limitations on something that is not limited. And I'm separating myself from that. So the good news of all this, the reason for the hallelujah, is that we don't actually have to wait for anything to change to find ease and space in our life. We don't need to become better people. We don't need the world to change. It's available to us in every moment. The path of liberation is exactly my life as it is right now. And it's easy for me to hear that as the path to liberation is my life right now. Like, I'm walking the path right now, but liberation is over there. But that's not quite it. It's the path of liberation is my life right now. So, how I notice this manifesting most in my life at the moment, why this is kind of at the forefront of my thought, is I tend to be pretty good at pushing through difficult circumstances. I tend to get myself stressed out, have too much on my plate, and I hunker down and I'm like, I can just get through this. Right? And right now, I'm kind of stressed out at work. My job's a little intense. And I know that in September, I'm cutting back to half-time because I'm going back to school. And so as soon as I have that out, my mind immediately wants to go to, I'm just going to hunker down, I'm going to get through this summer, and then I'm going to have so much more space. And then I'm going to be able to do all the things that I want to do and I'm not be stressed. And I don't want to miss this summer, right? I don't want to get to go to fall and think, what happened, right? This is my favorite time of year. It's not winter. I don't want to miss it. And I know that it's an illusion, that I'm going to get to September and there's going to be a whole new set of circumstances. I'm going to be feeling disconnected from my coworkers and from my work because I'm not there as much. And then I'm going to have school and it's going to be stressful and there's going to be a whole other set of circumstances that aren't lining up how I want them to. And I also don't want to miss what's available for me in my life right as it is right now. I love my work, right? There's a lot of wonderful stuff there, and I don't want to be missing it because I'm just focusing on how stressful it is. So I always have to ask myself, how can I find ease and joy in my life right as it is, right now? And I know that if I can't find that spaciousness and ease in my life right now, I won't be able to find it then either. If I can't find it in this moment, I can't find it in any moment. And on a bigger level, I know that if I can't find that now, I won't have the stamina for the big challenges in life. The ones where there isn't an end in sight, right? Where you can't just hunker down and push through it because it's not sustainable. So there's the classic difficulties in the Buddha's story of enlightenment, of old age, sickness, and death, right? Whether that's ours or of the people that we're close to. There's things like parenting, being a long-term caregiver for anybody, whether it's a spouse or a parent or a child, or that, that trajectory is long. There's no way to just we can try to just push through it, but we won't, right? There's the deeper problems of society and of the planet, the things that are so big that no matter how much work any one person puts into it, we're not going to be able to see the solution through because the problem is bigger than us. If we can't find freedom, joy, meaning in our life in the middle of difficulty that can't be solved and can't be escaped from, then we're going to burn out, we're going to break, we're going to have to turn away because we can't keep facing it. And if we look around, we see that all the time, right? That's one way to describe a lot of what, a lot of the ills in people's lives and in societies. And I don't want to live my life that way, right? And I want to say in here somewhere really clearly that all of this is not about being passive, and it's not an excuse for inaction. Okay? We may find ourselves in situations that are completely untenable, and definitely on a collective scale we do, right? There are circumstances in the world that are completely unacceptable, and we need to take action to try and change those. You know, we chant when we're eating, right? The first bite is to end all evil, the second is to cultivate all good, and the third is to free all beings. So we need to take action to work to end evil and cultivate good. But if all we're doing is pushing circumstances around, we're not going to find the transformation that we're looking for. And there's something in being able to find that freedom in things exactly as they are, being able to experience this world as it is, as enough right now. It's somehow what enables us to keep taking action. Right? They actually go hand in hand. So, how do we practice finding freedom and joy in the middle of samsara? You know, how do I find the path of my own life right in the middle of things exactly as they are? And the two things I'm going to point to today are sit zazen and take some vows. So Dogen says that zazen is the dharma gate of joyful ease. The zazen that I am speaking of is not meditation practice. It is simply the dharma gate of joyful ease, or ease and joy. So preferably, sit more zazen than is comfortable. Whatever that means for you. Sit enough zazen that you find yourself going, how in the heck could this be the dharma gate of joyful ease? How is that possible? Because that's really the question, right? How do I cultivate ease and joy in the middle of being uncomfortable? So maybe for you that means sitting 15 minutes every day. Maybe that means going to sesshin, going to rohatsu and sitting for 8 days. But it should feel, it's not that it should always feel uncomfortable, but we should get to the point where it feels uncomfortable. And that investigation is endless. And I don't want to limit by saying anything about it, but just some really practical things. Really investigate how it is that you cultivate ease when you are uncomfortable in zazen. And how does that apply to the rest of your life? If I'm experiencing physical pain in zazen, how does my experience change when I am fighting the pain? And how does it change when I'm able to just relax into it and accept it? What is it like when I am waiting for the bell to ring? Oh God, oh please let the bell ring, please let the bell ring. Or when I'm able to just accept that it is completely not ringing right now. People say the bell's never going to ring, and I don't really like that because of course the bell is eventually going to ring. It's just that right now it is completely not ringing. And no amount of thinking about it is going to make it happen, right? Why is it that sometimes sitting sesshin for 3, 5, 8 days is easier than sitting for 1 day? Can I find deep rest in the middle of feeling uncomfortable? And something Hojo said at sesshin recently that really stuck with me was, can I receive this moment as enough? As I'm examining my physical posture in zazen, what brings me more release? Is it what I thought it was going to be, right? And how does all of that translate into the rest of my life? Do I move really easily? Do I give up before the bell rings every time? Do I torture myself and sit when actually maybe I really needed to move? How do I know? Do I feel some kind of pride in being able to tough it out? Do I feel shame when I have to move? And it's not that there's any right or wrong in any of that, but it's helpful information to know which way I lean so I can help to bring myself back into balance. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is making some vows or commitments. And it doesn't matter if our vows are big or small, right? That could be about making some practice commitments like we did during the last term. It could be about working with the precepts. It could be looking at commitments that you've already made in your life, like if you're in a committed relationship or if you have children, or commitments to your work, and taking some new intention to those vows. Big or small, choose carefully. Try not to make vows that you can't keep, although that's educational also. But good commitments should be long enough that you can't just push through them, right? And they should start to chafe. They should start to get difficult after a while. If they're too easy, if they don't make you feel constrained, then maybe you need to take some bigger vows. And then the study becomes, how do I respond to that chafing, to feeling constrained by my commitments, when running away is not an option? How can I unfold my life through my vows? Not around them, not in spite of them, but through them. And not, how can I just live life through them? Sometimes it feels like when we have a lot of commitments, that living life means just living up to obligations in a way where we have no choice and no freedom, and it's not about my life and my intention. So how is it that I can unfold my life through whatever circumstances are in front of me? And the questions that I find most helpful in this are, what is my deep intention and how can I live through it in this moment? And what do I need to relinquish? And that question is really hard, and it makes me feel soft just thinking about it. Because I think about the situations in our lives, and just looking back to when my kids were younger, and a really typical American life, right? I've got kids, I've got work, I've got family and a partner, I've got practice, I've got a home, all the things that I am committed to, and I feel pulled in 6 different directions, and I'm exhausted, and it feels absolutely impossible to get everything done, and especially to get everything done well, to feel like I'm actually meeting everyone and doing justice to all the parts of my life. And when I say, what is it I need to relinquish, that just feels heartbreaking. Like, how could there be anything left to strip down? Or I think about times when I've been really poor. I was like, well, what do I need to relinquish to find ease? So what am I supposed to do, stop eating? Right? But the mystery in this is that it seems to be in the willingness to relinquish that the space and freedom opens up. It's not about what I cut out or get rid of. It's about what I'm able to let go of, right? That's really what relinquishing is. I'm back to my favorite, like opening the hands, letting go. But that's really it. The relinquishing isn't what am I willing to get rid of. It's what am I willing to stop trying to control. And when we ask those two questions together, what is my deepest intention and what am I willing to relinquish? Then what opens up is inevitably a whole lot of ideas we had about, for example, what it means to be a good parent, what it means to be a good partner, what a good practice has to look like. A lot of rigid ideas that were really about circumstances that can be let go of. And it enables us to meet the circumstances of our life in a different way and see the space for our life to be full that's right there in the moment. And new ways open up, new things open up that we couldn't see before. And it kind of feels like magic, and that's the place where I can't logically explain how it happens. It just does. Nothing shifts but our perspective, but our whole life is transformed. And just like everything else in the world, it doesn't stay transformed, right? Walking this path of liberation, this waking up, is step by step. It's waking up to it moment by moment. And so it's a constant investigation, constantly asking ourselves, how can I find freedom in this moment? How can this moment be enough just as it is? So, we don't have to wait. Right? We don't have to wait for the world to change. We don't have to wait for ourselves to change. We don't have to separate ourselves from the life that we are kind of aching for. We can choose to meet it. And I think I could keep rambling on about that, but I'm going to stop and make space for questions, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Jikie? I understand the sentiment of our ability to find freedom, in our circumstance, and instead of, to try to change our circumstance, we can come back to ourselves and try to find freedom in the moment and change our perspective. But something I'm wondering is, are there times when it is necessary to change our circumstance in order to free ourselves from the situation? And how does one decide, when to stay in a circumstance that is causing, that is where you are suffering, and when do you withdraw yourself from it?
Mm-hmm. So I think a distinction I would make is that my freedom is within me, right? But circumstances often are completely unacceptable, right? Often we need to change our circumstances. Or even when it's not such a big problem. I might find when I directly face the moment that I'm in, that it just isn't actually where I want to be, right? That I've been completely putting my energy in the wrong direction. But often we are in situations where we are suffering because something needs to change. but our ability to actually make those changes really relies on our ability to accept the situation for what it is also. To step out of Buddhist terminology and just talk about radical acceptance, again, it's not about being passive, right? I have to be able to look clearly at the situation, to meet it fully, to be able to know what needs to change. Otherwise, I'm just kind of pushing circumstances around and not really making a change. And that, how do you know when you need to make a change and when do you not, is not an easy question. Especially when we start talking about vows and commitments. Like, what if I made a commitment and I'm realizing that it's really not working? And I don't think there's a real simple answer for that. I know in my own life, it involves talking to people I trust, listening to the advice of people that I trust. And it involves being able to see that moment as my whole life. And this might sound a little bit odd, but for example, if I'm in a really bad relationship and it's not working, right? The only thing that actually has the chance of transforming that relationship is for me to say, what if nothing changes? What if this is how it's going to be? What do I need in order for this to be okay for me? And then I can directly ask for that. And if I don't get it, then I know that I'm going to have to step out of it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right? But as long as I am still seeing it as something that I'm trying to like manage and control and find a way that it's going to be okay for me, I can't give it the opportunity to actually transform, and I also can't find a place that tells me I need to leave. I hope that makes some sense, because
Thank you.
Jikie?
Yeah.
A long time ago, I had, maybe a week, 3 or 4 days, I don't know, of a message on my machine. I had a physical that, and I probably had a mammogram, that said I needed to call and make an appointment for a biopsy. My doctor was out of town. They had used the wrong word. But it was 3 or 4 days before I actually got all this cleared up, that it was a water cyst and not breast cancer. Mm-hmm. When this happened, I made a vow, a private vow, because it was what I understood in that moment, that whatever had been going on in my life at that moment, I think it was all right, was incredible happiness compared to the possibility that I had cancer. Mm-hmm. And I vowed, and it was such a state, I vowed to never forget that state. Well, we all know what happened. Yeah. So for some reason this morning, listening to you, I had that memory. I don't forget it. However, the present can overwhelm that truth. And sometimes when somebody's in great distress, or myself, I say, it's not cancer.
Yep.
You know, the kind of buzzword for me. And I think this is, listening to you, it seems to me this is the moment-to-moment great challenge.
Yeah.
For sure. So, thank you.
Yeah. One of my best friends, little boy, had brain cancer when he was 3. And it was very close, and he will be very special needs for his whole life because of that. And now he's in high school, so it's not so acute a sorrow currently, and that's the buzzword always is, it's not brain cancer. Whatever happens, it's not brain cancer.
Yeah, all I was going to say to the previous discussion was that I find helpful reflecting on the difference between acceptance and resignation.
Yes.
And that acceptance is not resignation.
Yes.
You know, and I think there's a we could almost think of, if you know this, the concept of the near enemies that in one school of Buddhism talks about. I think acceptance and resignation can be very close. They can be near enemies. So I think really reflecting on that is really important.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you can just feel it. You can feel it if it's resignation, and you can feel it if it's like it's resignation. What can I work with? What can I ask for and get what I need? And what do I just have to put up with? Like someone used to say to me about a marriage, you get what you put up with, which is kind of an ugly way to frame it, but it is kind of true.
But it's true. Yeah. And I think this is really important. I was going to come back to this too. And I was thinking about that a lot as I was giving this talk, because looking around at the religions of the world, we seem to have a tendency as people to lean towards this poison of whatever the teaching is, kind of, it wants to warp into a way that says that's just how it is, right? And in Buddhism, this is an easy way for it to go. Like, liberation is right here. The world is Buddha nature, just as it is. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. And so everything is fine and we don't need to do anything about it, which is not the teaching, right? It's not about being passive. It's not about accepting that the world is unjust and therefore we don't need to do anything about it. Right? And I think about a person that I used to know whose superpower and great flaw is that she had this incredible ability to just put up with whatever was happening. And that's great, to be able to tolerate a lot. But it also meant that she raised her children in circumstances that were really damaging to her children, because she was willing to just let things slide and accept that everything was how it was and not make changes. So accepting the reality of our situation, finding freedom and joy in this exact moment, does not mean not changing things that need to be changed. And there is a way that acceptance is the key to being able to see what needs to be changed.
As listening to your talk, I was thinking a lot about how this played out in my own life, and kind of from an individual perspective. But it seems that the same is true for how the individual relates, say, with Sangha, and then how the community kind of follows these ideas for itself as a collective. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how to enact this in relation to community, but for community's sake as well.
I don't know how I don't know that I know how to talk about how community can hold it, because I think it's something that has to happen in each of us, right? I know that as we come together as a Sangha, the way that we are able to hold space for each other and be willing to set down our own viewpoint, our own opinion, that personal willingness to relinquish my ideas about things and my need to control things allows for the community to develop and to address things in a positive way. And I think that Sangha and community and society is made up of all of us as individuals and how we meet each other and how we try to be in relation to each other. And how I know to carry that in community is to do my best to embody it in my own life and to meet the people that I meet through that, and let that transform our meeting. I hope that lands in some way.
Sorry, I was just thinking. Sorry. What I find in my life is that there are circumstances that it's not a matter of me making decisions about whether I want to accept them or deal with them. That there is a reality, for me anyway, that certain things are as they are. And although I seek to open to gratitude, to serve those circumstances, that in itself becomes a certain grasping. I mean, that again is, if I just experience gratitude in this, it'll be okay. But I mean, there are things in life that really aren't of my choosing and aren't, they're not electives. They're,
Exactly.
kind of like they're requirements.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but it's just finding that. My teacher before I came here used to say that her definition of joy was exactly what's happening in this moment, minus our thoughts and opinions about them. But to be there is not always easy for me.
Yeah. This is exactly where this is important. And this is why I didn't focus the talk on knowing how to finding out what you can change and what you can't, because the reality is a lot of life is these things that we cannot change, right? When the people that we love or ourselves are facing some kind of difficulty that we can't fix it, right? Nothing we can do is going to make it okay. It just isn't, right? And yet we have to show up and meet it. And we have to meet it as our whole life, both because that's the only way to really be able to meet it with any kind of openness, and because often we are looking at things that are going to be our whole life, or at least we can't see the way out at this time. And when it's really difficult, I remember Hojo-san asking me once, what brings you some relief right now? Right? And I think I said going for walks. And he said, wash, rinse, repeat, right? Keep doing those things moment to moment that help you be okay, help you meet it in a way that you can handle. But it's exactly in the middle of these circumstances that we can't fix and we can't change and we can't walk away from, or at least we wouldn't still be ourselves if we did walk away from them, that this deep transformation has a chance to happen. And we can't force ourselves to find that transformation, and we can't lead someone else to it. But it's those questions: what is my deepest intention here, and how can I unfold it in this moment, and what can I let go of, that for me anyway make that transformation possible. And for those things that are really painful and really difficult, it's just continuing to turn over that relinquishment and that, I mean, another way you could say what is my deepest intention is like what is most important to me here, but not what circumstance is most important to me here, but what part of this is the most important for me to do well, right? And to just focus on that over and over and over.
I mean, I may have answered my question when so for several decades now, I've been attempting to practice never doing anything I resent, which has led me to a new concept, though I haven't given up the old one because I'm still practicing it, I'm still working on it, that some suffering is optional. And I know Buddhism says suffering is part, and I just am finding that less and less suffering, some suffering is optional, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that if I ask myself that question sometimes, it seems very clear that my own suffering is serving no purpose, besides making me miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I can just go. Is this what you're talking about?
I mean, yeah. A lot of suffering is optional. I mean, when we talk about dukkha, that word that we translate as suffering, it also just means unsatisfactoriness, right? That kind of general angst of being a person. A lot of that is our own perception. Like some people would say all suffering is optional, right? All difficulty is not optional, but do we need to suffer from it? Is there a difference between pain and difficulty and suffering? Right? I don't quite like to say all suffering is optional because when really, really difficult things happen, I can't personally say, oh, well, that doesn't have to be suffering. I just don't think that's realistic. But we certainly make things a hell of a lot worse for ourselves most of the time than we need to. Yes, absolutely.
Right. So it's my question to ask myself, and it would be someone else's question to ask themselves.
Exactly.
Certainly not my answer to give to somebody else.
Exactly, yeah.
Jikie.
What does it mean for something not to be okay, to say this is not okay?
Do you mean...
Which things are not okay?
I mean, there's not okay as in doesn't line up to how I want things to be, which is most things most of the time. And then there's, and I'm not sure if you mean that or not okay as in
like
this is unacceptable
this
and
is
I need to make a
unacceptable.
change. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something you have to know for yourself, right? And that's not something that anybody else can answer for you. I know that a lot of us have a hard time telling if, especially difficult relationships, difficult circumstances in life that where we're maybe being mistreated or abused or simply have been told that it's not okay to stick up for ourselves, or we're seeing that harm is done to somebody else. And it can be really hard when you're in the middle of it to know that that's what's happening and know whether you should stick it out or walk away. And sometimes that's where we have to rely on other people, right? If everyone in my life is telling me that this is really not an acceptable situation and I shouldn't be staying in it, then maybe I need to at least extricate myself from the situation physically while I figure out a different way forward. As a society, you know, we look and we say it is unacceptable that we have the homelessness problem that we have in this society, in this town, in this country. It is unacceptable that we're making the planet uninhabitable, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean, unfortunately, that I have the power to change it, but it's definitely somewhere that I just feel like I need to be taking some kind of action. But what that means for me isn't going to be the same as what it means for somebody else, and nobody can really tell each other.
Jikie. Hearing you speak about like relinquishment and making a vow and understanding what you can relinquish, I've kind of a question about what that means, because when you spoke of, you know, when Hojo-san asked you what brings you the most joy, and in my own circumstances, it's like sleep. Sleep brings me so much joy. And thinking about, you know, where's that line between relinquishment and caring for yourself? Yeah. At what point should you relinquish caring for yourself? Because, like, you know, sitting zazen, and it's like, well, you only have so much time in a day, and it's like, do I relinquish self-care to make this vow, or do I take that time to care for myself? And where that line is.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I think one part of that answer is trial and error, right? That we do what you think and step out and try it and see what happens. I think another important piece is part of why that being willing to relinquish is kind of magic is that we find out that we were putting a tremendous amount of energy in trying to control things. And that when we aren't trying to control the outcome of situations, we have a lot more energy and space. I know for me personally that there's something about finding deep rest and deep caring for myself that's not spending time in distractions that kind of feel like they're taking care of myself or resting and actually are sapping my energy and not giving me the rest that I need. And the only way that I find that is by kind of stumbling through it and noticing, paying attention to what works and what doesn't, what affects my experience. And I would point back to actually studying yourself in Zazen and how things affect you in your practice, and think about how that relates to the rest of your life. And that when I am really focused on self-care as opposed to self-indulgence, that self-care doesn't conflict with me carrying out my obligations. If I'm really caring for myself, I'm also caring for my ability to meet my obligations. And that might mean, like if we're talking about practice, there might be days when what you really need to do is just sleep, right? And you might wake up one day and decide, today what I really need to do is sleep, and do it, and then go, actually maybe that wasn't what I needed, maybe that was self-indulgent. And you might find yourself sitting on the cushion nodding off and getting exhausted and think, oh, I'm getting sick, I really needed to sleep, right? And it's just that play back and forth and listening and being willing to make mistakes and be tender with yourself. And we should probably call it.